Hello, happy greetings to my parables class. Thanks for tuning into this video. We are lesson number 6. If you would like to open a Bible back to Matthew chapter 13, if you have not already picked up a copy of the class material here at the church building, right beside this video is the opportunity to download lesson 6. You can see that it is subtitled over to the left, Parables about the surprising arrival of heaven's kingdom. We're entering kind of a new phase of this quarter-long study. We've spent a good amount of time laying some foundational planks beneath what we hope to build throughout the rest of the quarter. I'm excited to hop into it. I hope you've already had a great day. Why don't we get our minds locked in and our hearts focused by going to our Heavenly Father in prayer. Would you pray with me, please? Our great God and Father who is in heaven, you are awesome. You are so good to us, so patient with us. We will never hit the bottom of the level of your love for us. Father, help us to grow in our understanding of just how much you love us, what you have given for us, what you want from us and for us. Father, thank you for your kingdom. We know today who the King of all kings is. We can know today that our citizenship is in heaven, and from heaven, we are awaiting the appearing of our King. We thank you that your Son has shown us in so many different ways what the kingdom of heaven is like. And Father, we pray that our hearts would be open and receptive as we study from your word. Help us to live as kingdom citizens this week. Help us to live in such a way that others want to know more, that we might boast about our gracious King this week. It is in his name, the name of Jesus, that we pray. Amen. If you have not already opened a Bible, Matthew chapter 13. I mentioned already that we've laid a good amount of foundation and we're going to take a step further. Let me say before we dive into the material, there is no doubt in my mind that you're going to hear some banging and some saws and I don't know what else. This has been a noisy week around this church building, but we're thankful that the work of renovation continues. It's happening just a few feet away from the door of my office. And so just ignore that. Bear with me. Nothing's wrong. Good progress is being made. We have spent a lot of time on the first part of the title of this entire series, focusing on how the parables of Jesus help us see. We've looked in a variety of different ways. Week number 1, Jesus encouraged us to listen and behold. We introduced this entire study with Jesus has something to show us, and it's going to involve whether or not we are willing to hear and behold what he has to show. We moved from there to really try and lock in the idea, what he wants to show us has to do with the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven. And so we noticed over and over and over again in lesson 2, references to the word of the kingdom. What does Jesus want us to see and hear about? The kingdom of heaven. In lesson 3, we took an Old Testament detour and noticed the deep, ancient roots of the Lord's vineyard. And that tapped us in when we saw that Jesus leans heavily on Isaiah 5, Isaiah 6, and beyond. introducing the idea of the kingdom, but establishing that he wants us as his disciples, where others have been unfaithful stewards, he wants us to listen to the messengers of the kingdom and especially appreciate not only is the kingdom of heaven at hand, but the true and rightful king, the son of the master, has come. Well, that led us, lesson number 4, to parables. Why parables? And in fact, we noticed that Jesus is just asked that question point blank. Why do you speak to the people in the form of parables? And we listened in as he taught us that parables have the ability to conceal certain things from hard hearts. That's as old as the Old Testament, but a problem that continued into Jesus' day and even into our own. But parables also have the ability to reveal what he referred to as the secrets of the kingdom of heaven to those with open and receptive hearts. Last week, lesson number 5, we took a brief moment to notice the power of parables, in a sense, to smack us awake, to knock out the foundation beneath us, the props that maybe we've been standing on for a good long time. Parables have the ability to stop us in our tracks and suddenly make us reevaluate. Do I know what I really ought to know? Am I seeing as clearly as I ought to see? Am I aligned in life the way that this king would have me to be aligned? For the rest of our study, lesson 6 today, all the way through the end of the quarter, now with all of that as our foundation, we're going to break the parables of Jesus into 3 major themes. And what I want to try and show you, of course, there is some overlap, but very generally speaking, those 3 major themes are found in an unfolding progress that we see in Jesus's ministry. 3 progressive seasons, if you will, of his teaching. Number 1, parables about the surprising arrival of heaven's kingdom. Now, this is really where we've been in laying the foundation. So we're only going to spend today 1 lesson on parables about the surprising arrival of heaven's kingdom. We'll call that a season of announcement. When Jesus began to teach parables, and we'll be in Matthew 13 as a good overview in just a moment. Lesson 7, next week we'll have several different lessons revolving around parables about the upside down nature of heaven's kingdom. It's like Jesus takes the minds and the hearts and the lives of several different people, as we will notice in the gospel, and just turn them upside down. Take what people thought they knew, who they thought they were, the fact that they thought everything was good, status quo is great, and Jesus takes it and he turns it upside down on its head. We'll call that a season of teaching. Finally, in the latter several lessons wrapping up this whole series, we'll look at parables about the crisis of decision that is caused by heaven's kingdom. As Jesus gets at the end of his ministry, it's like the door is just being knocked on in a variety of different ways, and Jesus very straightforwardly, even forcefully, puts all of this teaching in people's faces and essentially says, listen, you must make a decision. We'll call that a season of confrontation. You really see that as the Gospels unfold the ministry of Jesus. Announcement, teaching, confrontation. The surprising arrival, the upside down nature of, and the crisis of decision brought on by the kingdom of heaven. Parables are amazing. Let's just take a moment. You can see toward there, the middle of your material. In Greek, we really haven't talked about the meaning of the word. In Greek, para means alongside, and bol means to set. Alongside and to set. You put those two Greek words together and you can see very, very clearly that in this original language of the New Testament, we're referring to something that is set alongside something else, and they're compared. I'm going to take this, I'm going to take this, I'm going to put them together, and I'm going to compare them, or I'm going to use that to contrast something. That's what a parable is. Parable means to set alongside of something. And so that is why we will hear Jesus say repeatedly, even in this lesson, the kingdom of heaven is like, and he takes the kingdom of heaven and he sets it alongside something in order to help us see. So one lesson, because we've already used these in a different angle, most of them, to try and appreciate how the parables of Jesus help us see. One lesson today on parables about the surprising arrival of heaven's kingdom. A good way of taking the threads of this entire study so far and pulling on them and seeing if we can't get a big picture view. A good overview of this season of announcement is found in Matthew chapter 13. Are you there? Your Bible open. Let's take the time to notice some of these arrival parables. Obviously, I've got a limited amount of time in this video. I would certainly encourage you to take your time. In fact, if you want to pause this and you've got Matthew 13 there in front of you, if you would like to read it, you're not going to hurt my feelings. If you want to read those parables and chew a little on your own with them, I'm only going to be able to hit some high points. But let's dive in. Matthew chapter 13, verse 1. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea, and great crowds gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat down. And the whole crowd stood on the beach, and he told them many things in parables. We've noted to this point that he has repeatedly said in a variety of ways, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. At the top of your material, you've got a reference to Matthew chapter 10, where Jesus sent the disciples out, told them where to go, and said, as you go, proclaim the kingdom of heaven is at hand. In Matthew 13, he told them many things in parables, saying, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, since they had no depth of soil. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Now, we've gone back to this most foundational parable several times in lessons 1 through 5. But I really want you to look at it, think about it through the lens of the kingdom of heaven. What is Jesus doing? Throughout Matthew chapter 13, he's announcing the kingdom of heaven is at hand. He is this sower who is indiscriminately spreading that seed all over the place. Now, why do some eagerly hear that and receive it as good news? It's news of comfort. We want to know more. Jesus, we're going to follow you wherever it is that you go. The parable shows us the seed, the announcement of the kingdom of heaven is falling on good, honest, eager, humble hearts. Why do you have some that are great in the eyes of the kingdom of Israel, if you will, the kingdom of the Jews? You walk by some of these Pharisees, or you sit down with some of these scribes, or if you somehow have an audience with a high up Sadducee, why is it that some of these hear the announcement of the kingdom of heaven being at hand and they want nothing to do with it? They'll mock it. They'll ridicule Jesus. The more that it is announced, the angrier they get, to the point that we're going to eliminate Jesus by any means necessary. Well, this most foundational parable tells us why. Why does Jesus say things like, if you don't get this parable, how are you going to understand any of the other parables? Because it reveals how the word of the kingdom, as it comes into contact with different human hearts, different soul environments, if you will, why people react the way they do. Jesus is showing, if you're a fisherman and you're willing to listen to me, you need not be afraid, insecure, uncertain by the fact that this educated Pharisee is hearing the same announcement and having a very different reaction. The foundational parable explains to us the why. Do you remember we spent some time in the next paragraph a couple of lessons ago, but let's notice its context. Then the disciples came and said to him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" And he answered them, "To you, my disciples, it has been given to know the secrets of the kingdom of heaven." Why? Because of the condition of their hearts. But to them it has not been given. Why? Because of the condition of their hearts. They're hearing the same teaching. The only variable here is what sort of environment is the seed falling on. For to the one who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. This is why I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor do they understand. Indeed, in their case, the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, we spent some time earlier in this study, Isaiah 6, "You will indeed hear, but never understand, and you will indeed see, but never perceive, for this people's heart has grown dull." What's the variable? What's the problem? It's the human heart. With their ears they can barely hear, and their eyes they have closed, lest they should see with their eyes. What does Jesus want to help us see? Himself as the King, his kingdom as the greatest blessing I can come to be a part of. I hear that with my ears. If I understand that with my heart, I turn. And what does Jesus want to do? He wants to heal us. But healing is not available if I will not see what he wants me to see, hear what he wants me to hear, understand with a heart that is like cleared out, eager, receptive soil. It all starts right here with the announcement of the arrival of the kingdom of heaven. In verse 16, blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear. For truly I say to you, many prophets and righteous people longed to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. As we've established, lessons 1 through 5, many messengers came. Finally, the king himself has arrived. Now, earlier this quarter, we spent some time looking at the explanation of the parable of the sower, verses 18 through 23. We won't take the time to do that now. That's probably pretty familiar territory to you. Keep a marker in Matthew 13 and go with me to one passage in Mark chapter 4. A parable that only Mark records. In the context, it falls right here historically after Jesus' parable of the sower. It is another arrival of heaven's kingdom parable. Let's notice it in Mark chapter 4, verse 26. The kingdom of God is as if, that's what a parable is. Let me take the kingdom of God and something else, set them alongside of each other. The kingdom of God is as if a man should scatter seed on the ground. He sleeps and rises night and day, and the seed sprouts and grows. He knows not how. The earth produces by itself first the blade, then the ear, then the full grain in the ear. But when the grain is ripe, at once he puts in the sickle, because the harvest has come. That's what the kingdom of God is like. Now, let's not make that complicated, more complicated than it has to be. What's the real point here? A man scatters seed on the ground. He sleeps, and the seed does what it does. Verse 27, Jesus even says, the man knows not how. Early this past spring, I had to make a run over to Lowe's. I'm not sure why my watch is talking to me at the moment. Earlier this spring, I had to go over to Lowe's, and Jaden went with me, and I was buying a variety of things. She really wanted a few packets of seeds. All right, just a few cents really. We went ahead. She grabbed some sunflower seeds and a variety of other things that we planted along the side of the house, and it has been really cool as a dad to watch her tend to these flowers. It was still relatively cool and rainy when she planted those in the spring, just these tiny sunflower seeds. And now, on the side of our house, we've got sunflowers that are 2 feet taller than she is. She tries to go up there and take pictures of them, and she's got to reach her phone way high just to get up where the flowers are. Well, that's exactly what Jesus is talking about here in Mark chapter 4. You've got a man who plants the seed, but he doesn't have to stay up all night long. He doesn't have to work to bring this into effect. The seed grows. And it's simply a matter of what the farmer is going to do with what has grown. That's what the kingdom of God is like. Now, I need to make sure that I'm a part of that kingdom, right? I submit to the king. I submit to what the king is teaching me about his kingdom. Especially, I need to be responsive to the invitation to be a part of his kingdom. But listen, the kingdom does not depend upon me. The kingdom does not depend upon you. We are like those people who sow the seed first and foremost in our own hearts, and then we sleep, and the kingdom does its thing, and we don't always even know how. The kingdom grows. It's up to us to play just our really small part. Harvest will eventually come. Much more about that as this study goes along. Let's go back to Matthew chapter 13 and notice the parable of the wheat and the weeds. Matthew chapter 13, verse 24. Let's jump back in. He put another parable before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to. That's what a parable is. A man who sowed good seed in his field, but while his men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared also. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have weeds? He said to them, an enemy has done this. So the servants said to him, then do you want us to go and gather them? But he said, no, lest in gathering the weeds you root up the wheat along with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time I will tell the reapers, gather the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. Again, let's keep it just really simple. We've got a master. We've got the seed that is being sown, and we don't always know exactly what God is doing or how things are going to grow. Here, another element has been introduced. There's an enemy. The kingdom is surrounded by things that don't align with the kingdom. Not everybody submits to the king. And right now there is this great mixture all around us. Those who know the word of the kingdom, those who are learning the secrets of the kingdom, those who submit to the true and rightful king are surrounded by all sorts of people who do not. And the master is okay with that. Do you notice that? For a little while. The master knows that a great harvest is coming. And then, depending on whether or not you are on the king's side or you are declared to be an enemy of the king, then there will be this great reckoning, this great separation. But for right now, the kingdom is right in the middle of all sorts of stuff. Sounds a lot like the world today, doesn't it? Peek down at verse 36. He left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him saying, explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field. He answered, the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed is the sons of the kingdom. You see the focal point? The weeds are the sons of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers, and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. Harvest is coming. The kingdom of heaven, is it here? You want to make sure that you're a part of that kingdom, and it's all going to revolve around how the word of the kingdom interacts with your heart. A series now of several very short ones. Verse 31. He put another parable before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed that a man took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but when it has grown, it is larger than all the garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. This is starting really small, right? Jesus, ordinary looking man, fisherman, a tax collector, a zealot. I mean, it's starting really, really small. But is Jesus not essentially saying, trust me? Listen to the announcement. Hear the words. Don't be discouraged that there are others who don't want to be a part of this. Trust me. It's going to grow into something magnificent. Look at verse 33. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour till it was all leavened. It's going to be slow. In many respects, it's going to be silent. You're not going to be able to see a noticeable difference just like that. It's going to take time. But listen, just as leaven slowly, silently has an impact on the environment around it, the kingdom of heaven is going to grow into something amazing. Look down at verse 44. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. You have discovered the greatest treasure of all. And this kingdom of heaven is not about stamping out your joy. This is about the greatest joy of all. You have found life the way it was meant to be. You have found the answer to your sins that separate you from God. You have found the true and rightful King. You have found the way to be at peace with your past and know why you're here in the future. You have found the secret of how life is going to end and what life beyond death is all about. You have found what is greater than independence from Rome. You have found what life is all about. And it is worth making any sacrifice to make sure you're a part of this kingdom. Again, verse 45, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who on finding one pearl of great value went and sold all that he had and bought it. I know you have other treasures, but those are nothing compared to this treasure, the greatest pearl, even though you have a lot of other pearls. Don't miss out on this one. Look at verse 45. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search, verse 47. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was thrown into the sea and gathered fish of every kind. When it was full, men drew it ashore and sat down and sorted the good into containers, but threw away the bad. So it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come and separate the evil from the righteous and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Think about it. The kingdom of heaven comes into contact with all sorts of people. The kingdom of heaven initially, at its announcement, gets the attention of all sorts of people, the righteous and the evil. If you have been evil, acted unrighteously, you have been at odds with the King of the universe, but you hear the announcement of this kingdom, the kingdom of heaven, you repent and submit to the King, you have nothing to fear in the future. But listen, you're absolutely convinced you've always been righteous. You are righteous. You always will be righteous. Everything is great. You need nothing. You don't need to respond to this Jesus as he makes these incredible claims and has the audacity to make demands. You fail to submit to him. Reckoning is coming. It's all about how you respond to the announcement of the kingdom of heaven. Jesus asks in verse 51, have you understood all of these things? And they probably gave themselves way too much credit, probably the way you and I would as well. Yes, we understand. And he said to them, therefore, every scribe who has been trained for the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who brings out his treasure, what is new and what is old. I have much to teach you, Jesus is saying. I'm going to show you incredible things. I'm going to reveal to you so many things that are new. I'm going to uncover, make relevant, shine new light on some things that are very, very old. I don't need you to grow the kingdom. It's going to grow. Like a seed that is planted at night and given enough time, it grows, and the one who planted it doesn't even exactly know how or why that happened. I need you to be a scribe, a student, careful follower of the kingdom of heaven. And if you are, you will see incredible things. Parables, number 1, about the surprising arrival of heaven's kingdom. The announcement is made. What sort of soil does it come in contact with in my heart? I don't know how it grows, but it grows. And there are enemies. There is the greatest enemy of all who doesn't want this kingdom to flourish. And it's going to start small. And it's going to grow quietly. It's going to grow slowly. But what you have found is the greatest treasure of all. I know you have other treasures, but they're nothing compared to this treasure. You make sure that as you're caught in the net of this kingdom, you follow me, you listen to me, you submit to me, and listen. At the end of the age, you will have nothing to fear. Parables about the surprising arrival of heaven's kingdom. On the back of your paper for next week, we'll kick off a series of lessons looking at parables revolving around the upside down nature of heaven's kingdom. You want a sneak peek? Open your Bible sometime this week to Luke chapter 10, 25 to 37. Once you've read it, look at it through this kingdom of heaven lens. We've been spending so much time studying. How did Jesus' response to that lawyer turn him upside down? Encourage an upside down way of looking at life, then and now. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for your ongoing encouragement and feedback. Let's appreciate the incredible treasure that we have found. Let's live with joy that we have found it. Let's be ambassadors of this joy as kingdom citizens this week. Have a great start to the week. Thanks for watching.